Warning: tube amplifiers have lethal voltages inside them. Please do not attempt to build, test, or repair these without understanding and following all safety protocols. Hey y'all! Well, we're here for the final segment on the video series on installing these upgraded ISO Tango transformers onto this Willsenton R8. And honestly, we're at the end of the road. I'm not going to be doing any more upgrades or stuff to this amplifier. I've kind of tested all the tubes that I plan on testing in it and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we're done with this amplifier. And it has been a fun series. I feel like that this content has influenced the manufacturer to do some of the improvements that we've shown on this channel that has had the end result of a better product for any consumer that's buying this amp, and has turned it into a really nice product. And obviously this last segment was to try to take this thing to the next level, which these transformers did. But to go any further than this, we're going to be getting into, tearing out the original circuit design and building it as some other kind of amplifier that's going to be a ton of work. And at that point, these amplifiers have too much value as they are stock to be taking an amplifier that's worth, probably $1,000 on the used market and like ripping it all apart to have a chassis to build a from scratch amplifier, because that's what it would become at that point. And this chassis is not worth $1,000. So if you're thinking, yeah, I'm going to do these transformers and you're going to I'm going to put different heater transformers in it and put KT120 tubes in it and, just stop. Before you put these transformers on the chassis, you're not going to be happy with the KT88 tubes or think that there's some other circuit you want to do. Just box it up, sell it to somebody, and then save these transformers or that stuff for a from-scratch project and learn how to do the fabrication work. It's not that hard. And there's no point in spending $1,000 for the chassis, because that's basically what you'd be doing. So yeah, Skunkie does not recommend going any further than this. And if you don't think you'd be happy at this point, I would just stop, sell it, buy some of these transformers, and build whatever circuit you think is going to be the bomb, and from scratch build one yourself. So anyway, I'm going to show you some interesting stuff I found. I'm going to show you a little experiment that I did on the grid of the input tube, and then we're also going to go over the results of the feedback capacitance, all that kind of stuff. And then at the end of the video, I'll give a little roundup of the tubes that I ended up with in this amp for my recommendation and the results of our testing. So let's get to that. Okay, so we're back doing some feedback loop testing on this amplifier, and we had the feedback resistor, a 24K, connected on both channels. We also inserted a 110 PF cap across the resistor using a mica cap on both channels. And I want to show you what that did to the square wave, and we're getting very close to where I'm happy, if not there. So here is the left channel square wave at 1K. And as you can see, that giant overshoot that we had before is now this little small overshoot, which honestly I'm okay with. I would much rather see this than have this rolled down on the 1K sine wave, because like I said in the last video, when I've put enough capacitance in where this overshoot was completely gone, or this was rolled down a little bit, the amp just sounded dead. And with this little bit of overshoot we're seeing here, it's got a nice lively sound to it. So let's see what our 10K square wave looks like. And as you can see, this rolled off the front end. It's got a little bit of a overshoot here, but it's nothing like it was before with that giant spike. So this definitely tamed the square wave. And then if we go down to 100 hertz, see what that looks like. Same deal. Got a little overshoot here. It's way tamed down from what it was before. And so I think this 110 PF is going to be plenty for this amp across the feedback resistor. But I want to show you something that seems odd to me. And I've never seen this before, but I've also never used this high a quality of output transformer. Okay, right in this zone here, if you look at the orange number in the right upper corner, you can see it's right at 0 dB. So this is our reference point. Okay, we're down at 30 hertz, we're down less than a quarter of a dB, and even down here at 20 hertz, and this is pulling the amp at about 10 to 15 watts. Down here at 20 hertz, we're still not even 1 dB down. So this is some killer low frequency response. And I've extended this past what I normally do. I've got this running up to 100K because the frequency response on the top end never rolls off. Like here's 20K, and it's actually up a half a dB at 20K from where it is at 1K. And at 60K, it's only down 3/4 of a dB. At 50K, it's down 1/4 of a dB. I've never seen output transformers that extend out this far in the high frequencies. And I started doing some research, and I looked up some older amplifiers that had really good output transformers. One of them is the Dynaco ST35. And what they did is they put a low-pass filter on the grid of the input tube to limit what high frequencies even went into the amplifier. And I started thinking about this. It's like, if you remember, this amp was amplifying a radio station when the grounding was a little weird. When I had it hooked up to my tube phono stage, I could hear Loretta Lynn singing. And so this amp circuit is clearly capable of amplifying radio frequencies or picking them up and doing weird stuff with them. So I looked up on the Valve Wizard and some other sites talking about low-pass filters on the input of tube amps and just low-pass filters in general, and what it would take to put one on the input of this amplifier. And so I ended up with a 10K resistor on the grid of the input tube, and then added a 330 PF cap from the grid of the input tube to ground. So we've created this RC low pass filter on the input on the other channel. And let me show you what that looks like. And here you can see we have a much more normal looking tube amp high frequency curve. So you can see in here we're back to the 0, basically on that upper right hand orange number. It tamed this area in here between like 3K and 10K, and now it's only up less than 1/4 of a dB in this little area here, which I just don't think is going to be audible. And then 10K it starts rolling off, and at 15K it's only down 0.15 dB from what it is at 1K. So it's still going to have really nice high frequency sparkle. But then at 18.5K we're down 0.4 dB. But now when we're at this 50K, it's down 4.5 dBs. And then it just goes off a cliff. So we're not going to have this super high frequency going through any of the amps, which none of this is in the human audible range anyway, so we don't want the amplifier reproducing this. So for now, I just did this low pass filter on the input of one channel, and I want to go A, B, listen to this and see if there's anything audibly different. But this seems like a good solution. And again, here's the ST35 schematic, and you can see that they did this same resistor cap deal. They used a 47K along with a 33 PF, and my concern with using a resistor of that high a value is they tend to be noisier. And to have a resistor at 47K in the signal path didn't seem like a good idea. So I lowered it down to 10K and just used a little bit larger capacitor to create the RC low pass filter. And I think that's a better solution. So anyway, kind of an interesting problem to run into. And I saw this the other day when I was recording the other video, and I was like, that's weird. I'll figure that out later. And it just points to how super high quality these output transformers are, that they can actually reproduce signals at that high a frequency. And if you look at the data sheet, it's showing you that that's what it's supposed to do. So this is a new problem that I've never run into. Never used a transformer this good. And clearly, the previous stock output transformers were a low pass filter on the output. Now, one of the things that I've read too, when you have output transformers that extend this high in the frequency, it allows you to run a lot more global negative feedback without running into problems. This amp performs so good with just this minimal amount of global feedback. I just don't see the point to add anymore. Now, if I was using this amp exclusively near the 40 watt level, I would probably play around with that more. But the reality is this amp's likely going to be used by almost anyone 30 watts and less, and there's just no point to me in dumping in a bunch more global negative feedback. But again, if you do this and you've got some transformers like this that do extend really high frequencies, that's an option, and the amp should stay stable. So anyway, I did listen to this amp with the 110 PF cap across the resistor before I put the low pass filter on the input, and it sounds really good. I was really impressed. So want to do a little more listening, and I'll append that to the end of this video on my listening impressions, and this looks like a great place to wrap up this video. So I set this thing up in my system, did some left-right channel A/B testing, and it took a little bit of back and forth to really discern this because it was subtle. But I feel like that low pass filter on the grid of the input tube did kind of add some mushiness to the sound. It just wasn't as sharp and clean, and I could really hear it well with these quad S2 speakers with their ribbon tweeter. It's really sensitive to anything in an amp that pulls detail out, and so I decided to take that out of the system and just let it eat. I know it's kind of crazy that this amp will actually put out on the output jacks up to 100K, but at this point I don't know what else to do. I think originally the stock output transformers were acting as the low pass filter and rolling off the frequency on the top end, but when I tried to do that on the front end of the amp, it just didn't sound right. And I also tried changing the capacitance on the feedback loop, and that helped a little bit, or rolled that off a little bit, but again, it just audibly didn't sound good to me. And hey, some of you guys may have a solution or some other way of dealing with that, but it sounds so good I just don't want to mess with it, so I'm leaving that alone. And again, on the feedback loop, I did left-right channel, A-B'd after I took out the low-pass filter and just put the front end back like it was. I did 330 PF on one side, 110 PF on the other, A-B listened, and the 110 PF sounded way better to me. I mean, at least in my system with my speakers in my room, I like that better. If the amp sounds a little bright to you, you could put a 200, 300 PF in there, and that'll kind of tone down the high end, and you'd actually see it on the scope that the front edge would roll off more. But I feel like that this was a good combination for my system to use the 110 PF on the loop, and it got rid of the big overshoot, and so there we go. That's what we ended up with. And like I said in the intro, that's it for this amp for me. I'm done experimenting, I'm done playing, I'm done tube rolling, I'm happy with the way it is, and I feel like at this point, if you're going to go any deeper into this amp, like swapping out the circuit or whatever, just put the stock output transformers back on it and sell it. I mean, it's not worth spending $1,000 for a chassis, and that's what one of these on the used market would sell for. And then build yourself a from scratch amp, and then you got something really cool that you built from nothing. And you know, if you're at the point where you could tear the guts out of this amp and redo the whole circuit, you got enough skills to build an amp from scratch, and just go do that. I know that fab work might be a little daunting, but you can do it. It's not, don't be scared of that and let that just cripple you from being able to go to the next level in this DIY hobby of building an amp from just a bare box that you get from Hammond or somebody. So, anyway, let's go through the tubes that I put on the front end. The first one is this center tube, which is the capacitor multiplier voltage stage thing that goes to the voltage on the front end tubes. This does have an impact on the sound. I used to think it didn't, but after playing around with the amp, now that I've got some really good transformers and some revealing speakers, I can hear this too. And what I ended up with was this GE short bottle. It's a 6SN7 GTB that says USA under that. It's a little short bottle, side getter, tube. Used out here on this position, it rolls off the high end and it has like more bass, which I don't think this amp needed, but put here, it widened up the sound stage. And I tried, I've got some more of these tubes. I tried to put one of those here. It just narrowed up the sound stage. So this little short bottle GE really helped in this position. So then these outboard 6S and 7s, I'm using these National Electronics. And it may say NE on the box. And this one's actually got an NL on the little logo with a circle, looks like a crosshair. And then it's a 6S and 7 GTB made in USSR. And it's got the red print. And looking at the 68HC that the amp comes with, which, by the way, aren't bad tubes. But the construction looks so similar, it makes me think they were made by the same factory. But buying them as these National Electronics, you're getting some older production than if you buy just the 6H8C, because I don't know how long they kept making these. And so this ensures that you're getting an early production tube. And I've got a slew of 6S and 7 tubes because that's what my 300B amp uses. And I've got, the CV181 Horizon tubes that I really liked in my 300B tube. Didn't really care for them in this amp. Got the, the same ones in the Skunkie Treasure black coated ones. Didn't like those. I've got Sylvania tall bottle, those bad boy style that have the big getter at the bottom and then the elements up high, kind of like these. We'll go for these in a second. And didn't like those. These I like the best. They've got a nice, even presentation. They're keeping the soundstage and the layering without being too bright. and they're just a good all-around tube. So, hey, in your room, something else might work better, but people ask me what I like, that's it. And then finally, we have these, let me get the read off the tube. It's a JAN-CHS-6SL7GT. Then it's got VT-229, made in USA, Sylvania. And these have the bottom getter with the elements up high. I don't know if you can really see, but they look similar to the tall body, except the getter doesn't go all the way around. It's just in the front. And they got a little anchor on the back of them for the Navy stuff. Those are the best 6SL7s I've listened to. And I did try in another R8, not one with these output transformers, but my buddies, we tried some 8 to 9 pin adapters with some Gold Lion 12AX7s. Tried a bunch of different 12AX7s. The Gold Lion 12AX7s in adapters in this position also sound really good and have a nice sound stage, and just, yeah, they really work good in these amps. So either get these JAN tubes if you want to stay with an octal tube, which I kind of like the look of, or if you want to put an adapter in it, Gold Lion 12AX7s work good. So now on to the output tubes. We started off with a set of Gold Lion KT88s, which are kind of the standard tube that people seem to really like in this amp, and for good reason. They've got nice bass, they've got sparkly top end, they've got decent mid-range, they're not fatiguing, really pleasant to listen to tube in this amplifier. They're reliable, they're high quality, they're pretty easy to find. For a while you couldn't get them, but now they're back out in stores at fairly reasonable prices, so not a bad tube to go to in one of these amps. So then we tried a set of PSvane Horizon tubes that I have tried in this amp before. They're KT88 model, and like I said in a previous video, they've got a really dynamic presentation, which I like. They bring some extra detail out of the music, and to me that's something I really enjoy, hearing a more lifelike kind of rich sound, but at the same time having details. The KT88 Gold Lion might have a little more bottom end punch than the PSvane tube, but it's not a lot. But if I was going to give one over the other and be honest about the tubes after listening to the PSvanes for a while compared to the Gold Lions, I think the Gold Lions might have a little punchier bass. If you're using a powered sub, it ain't going to matter, and you're going to like the extra dynamics that the PSvane tube brings. So now we've tried a set of these. I just got these a couple of weeks ago, and I've been listening on and off to them. These PSvane Horizon 6550s. And to me, these tubes bring everything to the party. They've got the nice, smooth bass without being overpowering or boomy. They've got a really sweet mid-range, and they've still got the top-end sparkle and the dynamics that their KT88 tube has. And the good thing about these new PSvane tubes is they have the same grid resistor requirements that a KT88 tube has. The earlier New Old Stock versions, and I think even the Electro Harmonics of these 6550s, require a 50K grid resistor when fixed bias over 35 watts, and we're over 35 watts. And these are okay with 100K. They sent me the data sheet. Here's what the data sheet looks like. And so these are a drop-in replacement for a KT88 in any amp. So this is what I would get if I was going to buy some new production tubes. Of the ones I've tested, I really like these. And I tried those EH6550s in the past, and I don't know, they just sound a little muddy to me. They didn't rock my world like these did. So finally, I have my old gold standard, which is the Skunkie KT88-Z. And it's the same tube I've recommended to put in the MuseShare X7. It's the one I like in this amp. Swap the set of those in here, and they just bring a different sound than these 6550s. I would say that they're a little mellower without being muddy. They've got a little less dynamics, and if you found these to be fatiguing, they wouldn't be. But it depends on your speakers and your room and your listening preference, which one of these I think is better between this PSvane Horizon 6550 and the older, which are out of production, the Skunkie Treasure KT88-Z black bottle tubes. But you can still find them out there. You can still find match pairs and match quads and all that stuff. Yoda Electronics still has some. It's where I get my little tube rings and stuff. They've still got them listed on their site. I might buy another set before they're gone because I like them that much. But these are, like I said, a coin flip. Which one I think's better. And you might have to try both and see which one you like better. And same's true on these front end tubes. You may have some different front end tubes that you like better. But out of the ones that I have, which is a lot, but it's still limited. I don't have every tube ever made. There may be some other front end tubes that you like better, and that's cool. That's what's great about having tube amps. It's what I did my Monday monologue on, was tube amps. You can swap stuff out until you're happy, until you find the synergy that works with your system. So anyway, that's my tube recommendations, and that's the end of the road for the Willsenton R8. Not going to be doing any more content on this amp. Not going to be going back inside it. I've actually got somebody that may be buying this one from me just to, as a super R8, and I think it's a really nice amplifier at this point. And again, to go past this, you'd have to just rip out the whole original circuit and start over. And if you're going to do that, just sell your R8, recoup some of your investment, and use that money to buy the parts and chassis and stuff, and kind of go to the next DIY level of building it from scratch yourself. I just really don't see the point in taking it further than this. So, yes, I think these output transformers were a nice upgrade. The amp definitely sounds better. I think the feedback recommendation on the other transformers worked fine with this. If you've got a lot of time and a scope and stuff, maybe you want to dive into that deeper, but I'm done. This is kind of where I'm stepping off with this whole R8 thing, and I will let you guys take this thing from here. So anyway, hope you've enjoyed this journey. I think we've ended up with a better commercial product because of this video series. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Thanks to you folks that have joined my Patreon, especially you folks with R8s or just enjoy this content that have made donations at my website. I really appreciate that you see value in what I'm doing, and it means that much to you. It means a lot to me. So, like I said, stepping off the R8 train, and we're on to other projects. And until then, have a nice day.